Snow was falling hard that night at Castle Black. The cold wasn't just outside, it was in the air, in the bones, in the hearts of men standing on either side of the wall. Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall, stood proud before the night's watch. Even as he was surrounded, beaten, and stripped of everything but his honor, Jon Snow watched silently from the shadows, fists clenched. He knew what was coming. Stannis Baratheon wanted to make an example of Mance, burn him alive, show the wildlings that there was no mercy for rebellion. But Jon had seen war, death, and pride before, and this wasn't justice. It was cruelty. In the real world he waited, helped him die faster with an arrow. But what if he didn't wait? What if Jon Snow acted too soon? That night he didn't think, he moved. As the flames were being prepared and the crowd grew tight with tension, Jon drew his sword, not his bow. He didn't wait for the fire to be lit. He stepped forward and faced the guards. The wind howled louder. "I won't let you burn him," Jon said sharply, his voice firm. "This is not our way." Stannis turned his eyes to him like a hawk spotting prey. "You overstep," but Jon didn't blink. He walked straight to Mance, who looked at him with a strange mix of relief and confusion. "I'm sorry," Jon whispered, before pushing his sword through Mance's heart. Gasps filled the air. The wildlings shouted. The crows stiffened. For a moment everything froze. Mance Rayder dropped to his knees, blood soaking his clothes, eyes wide open, but there was no pain on his face, just peace. Jon had given him a clean death, not a burning one, but it was too soon. Too fast. Stannis' face darkened. "You just murdered my prisoner before my judgment." Jon wiped his blade on his cloak, face cold as the wind. "He was already dead in your eyes." And just like that, everything changed. Stannis didn't nod or yell. He just turned to Melisandre, the red woman standing beside him. "He defied me," she smiled, eyes glowing red like burning coals. "Let him burn too. Let the fire choose." The wildlings began to roar. Some screamed Jon's name, others cried out in confusion. Tormund Giantsbane broke through the crowd, dragging 2 guards down with him. "You killed our king too early, Crow," he shouted, but his voice cracked. But maybe that was mercy. Jon stood there torn. He knew he had done the right thing for Mance, but now everyone wanted blood. The Watch didn't trust him. The wildlings were confused, and Stannis now saw him as a traitor, not an ally. That night, Jon was thrown into a dark cell in Castle Black, not as Lord Commander, but as a prisoner. The war hadn't started yet, but now, the seeds of a new kind of fire were already burning. The cell was small, damp, and cold enough to freeze the breath in Jon's lungs. He sat against the wall, hands tied, sword taken, pride cracked. All he could hear was the distant shouting, wildlings arguing with crows, Stannis' soldiers patrolling harder than before. The wall hadn't been this loud in days. Mance was gone, but the storm he left behind was just beginning. Jon kept replaying the moment in his head, his blade piercing Mance's heart. The sudden silence that followed, and the look in Stannis' eyes. It wasn't just anger. It was betrayal. The heavy wooden door creaked open. Sir Alliser Thorne stepped in, arms crossed, face twisted in a half-smirk, half-snarl. "Well, Lord Snow," he sneered, spitting the title like poison, "you've done it now. You killed a king before the real king could pass judgment." "I always knew you'd mess things up," Jon didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead. Thorne chuckled. "You think this will win the wildlings over? They hate us. They fear us. And now they think you killed their king just to show off." Jon's voice came out low, but steady. "I killed him because he deserved a clean death, not fire. Not screams." Thorne leaned in, whispering like a snake. "And now you'll burn in his place." He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Enjoy your last night, bastard." The door slammed shut. Hours passed. Maybe more. It was hard to tell time in the darkness. Jon didn't sleep. He couldn't. His thoughts were loud, full of ghosts. He had lost trust with Stannis, and likely the Watch as well. Melisandre was probably already preparing her fire. And the wildlings, he didn't know. He had hoped saving Mance would give them something to believe in, but maybe he had done it too soon, too fast. The door opened again, but this time it wasn't a guard. It was Samwell Tarly, eyes wide with fear and sweat on his forehead. "John," he whispered. "We don't have much time." John looked up, confused. "What are you doing here?" "Helping you. You can't stay here. Stannis, he's planning to burn you at sunrise. Melisandre says the fire will reveal your true blood. I don't know what that means, but it doesn't sound good." John shook his head. "If I run now, I'm a traitor to the Watch." Sam bent closer, voice trembling. "If you stay, you're a dead man. Please, John. There's more going on here than we understand. Melisandre, she watches you like she's seen something in her fires. Like you're more than you think." John hesitated. His father's voice echoed in his mind. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. But what if the sentence was death by fire for mercy? Outside the cell, faint noises stirred. Sam looked toward the door nervously. "Hurry, Ghost is waiting outside." "I unlocked the back gate," John stood. "Thank you, Sam. You're braver than you know." Together, they slipped through the shadows of Castle Black. Most of the guards were at the front, watching the fires being prepared for John's execution. Melisandre stood by the altar, arms raised to the sky, chanting prayers in her foreign tongue. The red glow of fire danced on her face as she smiled like she already saw him burning. John and Sam moved quickly through the tunnels. At the edge of the wall, Ghost was waiting, white fur nearly glowing in the moonlight. The direwolf growled softly, nudging John's leg. Sam handed John a black cloak. "Go north. Tormund and the others might not trust you yet, but they won't kill you. And maybe you can lead them." John didn't speak. He just nodded and hugged Sam quickly. Then he climbed onto a horse and rode off into the night, Ghost running beside him through the snow. Behind him, Castle Black roared to life with shouts of alarm. Someone had noticed the missing prisoner. At the wall's edge, Melisandre opened her eyes slowly. "He runs," she said quietly. Stannis turned to her, frowning. "Should we send men?" She didn't blink. "No, let him run. The fire will call him back. They always return, when the time is right." But something inside her was unsettled. The flames hadn't shown her this outcome. Jon Snow had left the wall not as a prisoner, but as something else. Something the fire could no longer fully control. Out in the snow-covered woods, Jon rode fast and far, heart heavy, but mind clear. He had killed Mance too soon, yes. But maybe that was the only way to stop something worse. Now, alone in the wild with only Ghost by his side, Jon knew one thing for sure. He was no longer just a watcher on the wall. He was a player in the game now, and he had just made his first move. Snow fell in thick, quiet waves as Jon rode deeper into the woods north of the wall. His breath puffed in the freezing air, and Ghost padded silently beside him, ever watchful. The world was white and endless, trees like black bones stretching to the sky. Every crunch of the horse's hooves in the snow echoed like a warning. He didn't know where he was headed. All he knew was that he couldn't go back, at least not yet. By morning the woods grew thicker and Jon's horse was tiring. He stopped near a frozen stream and let the beast rest. Ghost stayed close, ears twitching at every sound. Jon crouched by the water, scooped a handful of snow into his mouth, and let the cold numb his thoughts. He had always believed in doing the right thing, even when it hurt. But this time, doing the right thing had turned him into a criminal, a deserter, a man without a home. Suddenly, Ghost growled low in his throat. Jon stood quickly, hand on his sword, eyes scanning the trees. From the shadows, figures appeared, slowly, one by one. Dirty furs, painted faces, rough leather armor, wildlings, at least a dozen of them circling like wolves. One of them stepped forward. Tall, broad, wild red hair tied back with bits of bone. Tormund Giant's Bane. "Well, well," Tormund said, voice rough but not angry. "Look what the snow blew in." Jon lowered his sword. "I didn't come to fight, no?" Tormund walked closer. "Then why sneak into the woods like a thief?" Jon looked him in the eye. "Because I had no choice. Stannis wanted to burn me. The Watch sees me as a traitor. I did what I had to, for Mance." Tormund stared at him for a long moment, then spat in the snow. "You killed him, Crow. I saved him. You robbed him of his chance to speak. To show strength, I gave him a death without pain. He didn't want to burn. the others murmured. Some nodded, others frowned. Tormund studied Jon like he was reading a battle map. "You think mercy earns trust," Tormund said finally. "Out here, mercy gets you killed." "I didn't come for trust," Jon said. "I came to warn you." Tormund raised an eyebrow. "Warn us?" "Stannis won't stop. He wants you kneeling. And if you don't, he'll burn every last wildling in the name of his god." The murmurs grew louder now. One of the men, a tall warrior with a missing eye, shouted, "Why should we believe you? You wear black." Jon turned to him, fire in his voice. "I left the wall. I left everything behind to keep Mance from screaming in a fire. If you can't see that, then kill me now." Silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Tormund scratched his beard. "He speaks like he means it. And Ghost there," he nodded at the white direwolf, "he don't follow liars." Jon looked around at them. "You don't have to follow me. Just don't walk blind into fire. Stannis is coming. And if you want to survive, you'll need a leader." "Aye," Tormund said slowly. "But our leader's dead." Jon took a step forward. "Then choose one and stand behind them. Because the next battle won't be just for land. It'll be for your lives," another voice called from behind. A small group approached from the trees, women and children among them. One of the older women looked at Jon and said, "He gave Mance peace." "That counts for something," Tormund grunted. "Maybe it does." He turned to his people. "We take him with us. If he lies, we gut him. If he's true, we'll see." Jon exhaled slowly. He wasn't forgiven, but he wasn't dead either. That was something. The wildlings led him through narrow paths, deeper into the north. They camped in a hidden valley, surrounded by snowy cliffs and caves. Fires burned low. Tents were patched with old banners and scraps. There were wounded, starving and grieving, but they were still alive. Jon saw how broken they were, how much they had already lost. Mance had held them together barely. Now they were a flock without a shepherd, and winter was only getting colder. That night, as he sat near a fire with Ghost by his side, Tormund sat across from him with a horn of sour ale. "You killed our king," Tormund said. "And yet here you are, among the people you were raised to hate." Jon stared into the flames. "I was raised to be honorable, and sometimes honor means breaking the rules." Tormund grinned slightly. "You sound more wildling than you think." Jon looked up. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." And for the first time in days, he felt the warmth of something he hadn't felt since leaving Castle Black. Purpose. The days that followed were rough. The wildlings had food, but not much. Water froze in their flasks. Children cried through the night, and old men coughed like their lungs were giving up. Jon moved among them quietly, not as a leader, but as someone trying to help. He helped carry firewood. He fed the weak. He patched tents and listened. At first, most of them avoided him. Some spat when he passed. Others whispered that the crow had killed their king, then ran like a coward. But a few, especially the women and the wounded, began to see what Tormund had seen. Jon wasn't trying to rule. He was trying to stop a war that was already marching toward them. By the third night, Tormund called a gathering. They built a fire pit in the center of the valley, flames reaching up into the dark sky. Hundreds gathered, wrapped in furs, faces lit by firelight and suspicion. Jon stood beside Tormund, arms crossed, heart pounding in his chest. Tormund raised his hand. "You all know why we're here." A few men shouted, "Because he killed Mance." Tormund nodded. "Aye, he did. And I hated him for it." His eyes moved across the crowd. "But I hated the fire more." The crowd went quiet. "I saw what that red woman wanted to do to Mance. I saw the fear in the eyes of our children. I saw the way her god danced behind her smile." He turned to Jon. "This crow gave Mance peace. Not for glory, not for power, but because he knew what was right." Jon stepped forward. "You don't have to like me. You don't even have to trust me. But I swear to you, if you stay here, you'll burn. Stannis will come with fire, with steel, and with the lies of a god that wants to own your lives." Someone shouted, "And what do you offer us? Another war?" Jon didn't flinch. "No, I offer you a way to live. South of the wall, not as enemies, but as people. If we find a way to move together, we stand a chance. But if we wait here, we die." Silence again. Cold wind whipped through the valley. Then a woman stepped forward. Her hair was grey, and her hands were scarred. My son froze last winter because we followed Mance south, and I'd do it again if it meant my grandchildren didn't starve. She looked at John. If this crow is the only one who sees what's coming, maybe we should listen. Tormund raised his horn. We move at sunrise. We'll circle south, near the coast. We avoid the wall. If we're fast, we can beat Stannis to the land. The wildlings murmured and nodded. Some still looked unsure, but no one argued. That night, Jon sat beside the fire, exhausted. Ghost lay at his feet, head resting on his paws. Tormund sat beside him, passing a skin of bitter wine. You've stirred the nest, Snow. Jon took a sip and nodded. They won't follow me. No, but they'll follow a reason to live. And right now, that's you. Jon looked up. I'm no king. Good, Tormund said, grinning. We don't like kings anyway. As the stars blinked overhead and the fire crackled low, Jon let himself believe, just for a moment, that maybe this could work. Maybe he hadn't ruined everything with that sword through Mance's heart. Maybe he had saved more than one man, but far away, back at Castle Black, things were turning darker. Stannis stood at the top of the wall, eyes scanning the horizon. Melisandre stood beside him, her red robe whipping in the wind. You let him go, Stannis muttered. I let fate guide him, she replied calmly. Stannis turned. Fate doesn't win wars. Men do. Melisandre smiled, her eyes glowing faintly. You don't understand. That boy you wanted to burn? He's more than just a crow. The flames whisper his name. Again and again. Then we'll find him. Bring him back. Burn him properly. She looked into the fire burning in a nearby iron bowl, her voice soft but chilling. He won't burn. Not yet. Below the wall, riders were already being prepared. Scouts would ride north at dawn. The chase had begun, and deep in the woods, Jon Snow, tired, hunted but unbroken, was about to lead the last free folk into a war that was never supposed to be his. The march began before sunrise. Jon stood at the edge of the wildling camp. Breath fogging in the freezing air as the first groups moved out, families wrapped in heavy furs, warriors with bone axes strapped to their backs, mothers carrying crying children on their hips. It wasn't an army. It was survival on foot. He helped wherever he could, lifted supplies, guided the scouts, shared food. Tormund walked beside him for most of the day, keeping the clans in line with loud curses and the threat of his fists. But it was Jon they kept glancing at, some with suspicion, others with something close to hope. They moved along the icy riverbank, heading southwest, avoiding known ranger paths and Night's Watch patrols. It was hard travel, slow, cold, and miserable. But Jon knew that Stannis wasn't far behind. By the third day, they reached the edge of a frozen ridge, overlooking a small, abandoned wildling village. Tormund called for a rest. Fires were lit, and for the first time in days, the wildlings had warm food. Jon sat near one of the fires, sharing roasted rabbit with two boys who had never seen the wall up close. They asked him about the crows, about the tunnels, about the firewoman. He answered simply, kindly. That night, as Jon stared into the crackling flames, Tormund approached with a hard look on his face. We've got a problem, he said. Jon looked up. What kind? One of our scouts, Crag. The bastard's missing. Could be the cold, Jon said, though he didn't believe it. Tormund shook his head. Could be Stannis. They stood and headed out together with two others, following the tracks toward the tree line where Crag was last seen. It didn't take long. Just past the ridge, hidden behind a snow-covered boulder, they found his body. Frozen. His throat had been slit, eyes wide open, tongue missing. Jon knelt beside the corpse. This wasn't Stannis, Tormund grunted. No, this is darker. Behind them, one of the men whispered, Thens? Jon looked up sharply. The Thens are with us. No, Tormund growled. The few who still live broke off after Mance died. Didn't want to follow no one, Jon stood. Then we're not just being hunted by the south. As they returned to the camp, the unease grew. Fires were kept lower. Guards were doubled. The wildlings were used to danger, but this was different. Someone was stalking them, picking off the stragglers. Later that night, John was awoken by ghosts snarling outside his tent. He grabbed his sword and ran out. The camp was quiet, but Ghost was standing over something. Another body. This one was a young girl. Maybe 12, no wounds. No blood, just dead. Tormund came running, red hair wild, followed by others. What in the gods' names is this? He muttered, kneeling beside the girl. John's eyes narrowed. Her skin was pale, too pale, even for the cold. He touched her cheek, frozen solid. No one heard a scream, he asked. The others shook their heads. John stood slowly. This isn't Stannis. This isn't deserters. This is something else. He looked north, toward the deeper wild. Tormund followed his gaze. You think it's them? John didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew. The dead were moving again. By morning, the march turned desperate. John ordered scouts to move in pairs. No one traveled alone. Campfires were kept burning all night. The children weren't allowed to sleep without someone watching over them. The wildlings didn't argue now. They felt it too, that cold that wasn't just the wind, that silence that felt like death was listening, and still, the bodies kept showing up, 3 more by the 4th night, all frozen. No signs of attack, just empty, lifeless eyes and stiff blue lips. John gathered the elders and Tormund. We're being hunted, not by soldiers, by White Walkers. The room went quiet. One of the elders shook his head. No one's seen them in years. Some say they were never real. John's voice came out hard. I've seen them. I've fought them, Tormund nodded. So have I, John paced slowly. We need to move faster. Every night we camp, we lose more. They're watching us, waiting. But where do we go? Someone asked. John stopped. There's a way through the gorge below the frost cliffs. It's risky, but it cuts a day's travel off. Risky how? Asked Tormund. Thin ice. Cracked paths. One wrong step and you fall. The elders murmured nervously, but John stepped forward. You follow me. I'll lead the front. If we stay here, we die slow. If we move, we might outrun the dead. Tormund clapped him on the shoulder. Then we run. And so the next morning the wildlings moved again, this time not just to escape fire, but to outrun ice. As they approached the frost cliffs, wind howling above, Jon Snow tightened his cloak and led the people down into the dangerous gorge. Behind them, in the snow-covered woods, the first pair of pale blue eyes opened beneath a fallen tree. The dead had found their trail, and they were coming. The gorge was death, waiting in silence. Jon stood at the edge, looking down the narrow, jagged path, carved by wind and time. The cliffs rose high on both sides, snow tumbling in thin, quiet drifts, and the icy ground crackled underfoot with every step. Below, the frozen river glistened, solid in places, hollow in others. One wrong step, and it would swallow you whole. He turned to the wildlings behind him. Stay close. No one walks alone. Step where I step. No shouting, no running. The people nodded, eyes wide, clutching their furs tighter around their bodies. They were used to danger, but this was different. This was nature itself, daring them to move. Tormund walked up beside Jon. You sure about this path, Snow? No, Jon said. But I'm sure the dead are behind us, Tormund grunted. Fair enough. And so they began the descent. The ice cracked beneath heavy feet. The wind screamed between the cliffs. Jon led carefully, every step measured, watching for thin spots on the path. Ghost padded ahead, light and silent, his white fur almost invisible in the snow. The wildlings followed in a long, trembling line, mothers clutching children, warriors balancing weapons and supplies, elders helping each other along. About halfway down, Jon heard the first scream. He whipped around, sword half drawn. A young man had stepped too far from the trail. His foot broke through a thin patch of ice, and he slipped. Jon lunged, grabbing the boy's arm just in time. Others rushed to help, pulling him back before the edge gave way. He was saved, but barely. And now everyone's fear was louder than the wind. We don't stop, Jon ordered. Not for anything. Keep moving. But even he knew time was against them. That night they camped at the base of the gorge. Fires were few, built low between rocks. The cold felt sharper here, like it cut through bone. The river groaned beneath the ice. Some of the wildlings cried in silence. Others sharpened weapons they weren't sure they'd live to use. Jon sat by a fire with Tormund and the elder woman who had once spoken up for him. Her name was Ragnar. She was quiet, but her eyes missed nothing. "They're close," she said simply, staring into the fire. John nodded. "We saw tracks on the cliff. Bare feet. No living man walks barefoot here," she whispered. "Only the dead." Tormund poured hot broth into a wooden bowl and passed it to John. "We can't outrun them forever." "I know," John said. "But we're close to the southern edge of the frost cliffs. Once we get through, we're near the lakelands. Some old watchposts there. We might find shelter, or a way to warn the others." "Others?" Ragnar asked. John looked at her. "If the dead get past us, it's not just wildlings who'll suffer. They'll keep going, south, past the wall, into the kingdoms." Tormund leaned back. "Stannis doesn't believe in monsters. He'll believe when he's staring into blue eyes and freezing to death." That night, John barely slept. Ghost kept watch, growling softly into the dark. Snow began to fall again, heavy this time, like the sky was trying to bury them. Just before dawn, it happened. Screams. Loud, raw, close. John was on his feet in seconds, sword drawn. Flames burst from torches. Warriors scrambled. People shouted, tripped, grabbed their children, and then John saw them, shadows in the snow, walking silent, slow, and inhuman. Blue eyes glowing, mouths twisted in hunger. Whites, the dead had found them. John shouted, "Get the children behind the fires! Form a line, now!" Tormund was already cutting one down with his axe. "They're faster than they look." The wildlings fought like cornered wolves. Knives, spears, firewood, anything they could grab. John moved through the chaos, blades swinging, cutting down the dead, dodging burning bodies when he could. But for every one that fell, 2 more came. Ragnar was surrounded. John ran to her, slicing through a white that reached for her throat. Ghost leapt onto another, ripping it apart. "We're surrounded!" Tormund shouted, blood on his beard. "We'll never hold." John's chest heaved. He looked around, then up. The cliffs. He made a decision. Fall back to the higher ledge. He yelled, "We trapped them in the gorge!" It was a gamble, but the ledge above them narrowed the path. The dead couldn't swarm as easily. They began to retreat, pulling the wounded with them. John stayed behind, fighting off 3 at once, sweat freezing on his skin. Ghost never left his side. Once the last child was up, John climbed too, bleeding from a cut on his shoulder. He turned. The dead were swarming into the gorge like a flood. "Light the oil!" he screamed. Tormund lit the torch and threw it into the pool of black liquid they'd poured along the ledge. The gorge erupted in fire. Screams, high, inhuman, ripped through the air. The whites burned, thrashing, blue eyes bursting like stars. The flames roared high, licking the walls of ice. The wildlings stood above, panting, crying, covered in ash and blood, but alive. John collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Watching the fire consume the dead below, they had survived, for now. Smoke clung to the sky long after the flames died. The gorge was littered with charred bodies, blackened bones, scorched armor, twisted limbs frozen mid-crawl. The stench was unbearable, but no one turned away. The wildlings stood in silence, along the high ledge, staring down at what they had barely escaped. No one cheered, no one smiled. It hadn't felt like victory. John leaned against a rock, arm wrapped in a blood-soaked cloth, the wound from earlier still burning. Ghost lay at his feet, chest heaving but alert, eyes never still. Every snap of a branch, every gust of wind made the direwolf growl low in his throat. He knew what John knew. This wasn't over. Tormund sat nearby, his axe resting across his knees, face grim. "We stopped them," he said quietly, "but only some of them." John nodded, watching the ashes drift into the cold wind. "The White Walkers didn't come down into the gorge. Just their whites. They were testing us," Tormund spat. "Let them test. Next time we burn the whole God's damned mountain." But even he didn't believe it. He looked older now. Not in years, but in the weight he carried. These weren't battles. They were warnings. And the next one might not give them time to light fires. The wildlings began to move again by late morning. They left the gorge behind, following John's lead toward the old watchposts near the lakes. The land flattened out as they moved, but the air felt heavier, colder, even without snow. John could feel it, something creeping behind them. By nightfall, they reached a half-buried wooden tower beside a frozen lake. It was abandoned, tilted slightly, but strong enough to use for shelter. Fires were lit. Lookouts were placed. The children were fed first. John stood at the edge of the lake, watching his breath curl in the air. His wound ached, but he didn't sit. Tormund approached, 2 steaming cups in hand. "Drink. You'll freeze if you keep standing there like a damn statue." John took the cup and sipped. It was bitter, spiced, and strong enough to numb pain. "Thanks," Tormund stared out over the lake. "What now, Snow? We keep running until we reach the sea?" "We can't keep running," John said. "We need to send word, south. The Watch has to know what's coming. So does Stannis." Tormund gave a dry laugh. "Stannis? That man barely listens to himself. And the Watch?" He gave John a side look. "Last I checked, they wanted your head." "I know," John muttered. "But this isn't about sides anymore. If the walkers break through, there won't be any more kings or queens, just corpses." They stood in silence for a while. The lake groaned under the weight of the cold. Suddenly, Ragnar appeared behind them. "There's something you should see." She led them back into the camp, where 2 wildling hunters were dragging something behind them, a dead body. But this one was different. Not burned, not frozen, clean, pale. A crow. John rushed over and knelt beside the corpse. He recognized the man, Sir Harren, one of Stannis's riders. His eyes were wide open, lips blue, hands stiff, but his armor was untouched, his blade still sheathed. "No wounds," John said aloud. "No burns, no sign of a fight." Tormund frowned. "Then how did he die?" Ragnar leaned in, her voice low. "Same way the girl did, same way the others. Quiet, like something just took the life from him." John stared at the body, then up at the sky. "This is their power," he said. "They don't need to fight. They can steal the warmth from your blood without lifting a blade." Ghost growled. John stood quickly, eyes scanning the tree line. "Form a perimeter," he ordered. "Double the guards. No one sleeps alone." Tormund nodded and started barking orders. That night, the wind screamed louder than ever. The fires flickered as if something unseen were walking among them. Ghost never lay down. He paced the camp like a silent shadow, ears back, teeth bared. John couldn't sleep. He sat in the tower, sword across his lap, eyes locked on the horizon. And in the dead of night, he saw it. A shape, far across the lake. Standing still, pale, tall, cloaked in snow and frost, a white walker. It didn't move, didn't speak, it just watched. John stood slowly, heart hammering, unable to tear his gaze away. Then, without a sound, the shape turned and disappeared into the trees. Gone. John stayed there until morning, too frozen in fear to breathe. When dawn broke, he made his decision. He would return to the wall, even if it meant death. Because if the White Walkers were this far south already, then the Night's Watch had no time left to argue. They needed to unite or be buried under snow and bone. The sun was barely a dull glow behind thick grey clouds when Jon Snow set out, riding hard toward the wall. He left before the rest of the wildlings were awake, though Tormund caught him just as he was tightening the saddle on his horse. "You're not thinking of going back to that nest of traitors and fire worshippers alone, are you?" Tormund asked, arms crossed, eyes tired. Jon pulled his gloves on. "I have to. The dead are too close. And if the Watch doesn't act soon, the wall will fall before we even know they're at the gate." Tormund shook his head. "You really are your father's son. Stupidly noble." Jon almost smiled. "Better that than standing by and letting the world freeze." Tormund sighed. "You won't be welcomed." "I don't expect to be." "Then at least take this." He handed Jon a bundle of wildling arrows tied with red cloth. "Proof. Tell them you fought beside us, that we're not the enemy." Jon nodded. "Thank you for believing in me when you didn't have to." "I still don't," Tormund said with a smirk. But you've got a wolf at your side and fire in your bones. That counts for something." And with that, John turned his horse south, Ghost sprinting beside him once more through the snow. It took a full day and a half of hard riding through frozen winds and blinding snowstorms before Castle Black came into view, tall, black and silent beneath the shadow of the wall. As he approached the outer watchposts, horns blew, men scrambled, crossbows loaded, the gates remained shut. He stopped short, lifted his hands, and shouted through the snow, "I am Jon Snow, former steward of the Night's Watch. I come with warning, not war." From atop the battlements, Sir Alistair Thorne peered down. His face twisted in something between surprise and disgust. "You have a lot of nerve, showing your face here, traitor." John's voice stayed calm. "You can call me what you like, but the dead are marching. You've seen the bodies vanish. You've heard the screams at night. I've seen them with my own eyes." "Lies," Thorne spat. "You murdered a prisoner under royal order. You abandoned your post, and now you come crawling back, playing the hero." "I don't care what you call it," John said. "But you will open that gate, or you'll watch your men die when the White Walkers come knocking." There was a long silence. Then, from somewhere behind the wall, a softer voice called, "Open the gate." John recognized it. Maester Aemon. Reluctantly, the black iron gates creaked open. John rode through slowly, Ghost at his side, surrounded by cold stares and blades aimed at his chest. He dismounted as Thorne approached, sword sheathed, but fingers twitching. "You step out of line." "Once," Thorne warned, "and I'll hang you before nightfall." John met his gaze. "If we live to nightfall, you'll thank me." Inside the hall, John met with Maester Aemon, and the few brothers still loyal to the idea of protecting the realm instead of playing politics. He laid out everything: Mance, Stannis, the dead, the White Walkers, the burning gorge, the corpses that froze without wounds. Aemon listened quietly, eyes pale and full of thought. "They're coming," John said at last. "Not in months, in days, maybe less. The wall isn't ready." "We never were," Aemon said quietly. "Not truly. They made their plan in haste. Tormund would lead the wildlings to a hidden tunnel in the ice caves below the wall, a forgotten path John had remembered from his ranger training. They'd enter quietly, without banners or blades raised, and camp just beyond Castle Black. John would convince Stannis, somehow, to listen. And if not, he'd protect the wildlings with his own life, because they were no longer the enemy, the dead were. As night fell, the fires at Castle Black burned bright. Ravens were sent, armor was polished, old blades were sharpened. Dragonglass was handed out from crates, long forgotten. And then came the sound, a deep, echoing horn, not from the wall, from the forest. John and the watch stood atop the battlements as the trees shivered unnaturally below. Shapes moved between the trunks, silent, watching. Then one stepped forward, a White Walker, tall as a giant, pale as moonlight, armored in ice. It looked up at the wall and smiled. John turned to the men beside him. "Do you believe me now?" Even Thorne said nothing, because the war had arrived and mercy had started it. But maybe, just maybe, it would also save them all.